Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and DrDemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
Hello, this is Scott McDonald, and welcome to Dr. Demographics podcast. Now, I want to tell you a little something that is kind of an update. We've got a lot of people who have entered the field who are providing numbers on demographics, which is fine. The problem is the interpretation of these demographics is really being a problem. So someone will say, oh, this is a good area or it's a bad area. It's a place with potential or it's not. But unfortunately, the people who are doing this don't know enough about the analytics to really tell you if this is true, that this is a reliable place to practice, that it will be profitable, that it's growing, or that it is becoming what you want it to be. So I want you to kind of stick with me now as we talk about amateur and professional demographics. Now, I'm actually asking you to be a little cautious because I have had the experience fairly recently where some of our clients have invested in demographic reports and they've been very disappointed in what they've received back. Now, I'm not trying to say that a lot of sinister things are going on here or that these are bad people. They probably love their kids and pet their dog too. But what they're doing may not be of service to you. So let's take a minute to review this. Now, some people will assume that demographics are easy to obtain, easy to understand, they fit all circumstances, and they're dependable. Unfortunately, that's not really true because I got in an argument with a doctor one time who said, I shouldn't have to pay for demographics. They're free. Well, in theory, they are, but the interpretation of the demographics is really what you're paying for, not just the data. You have to know what you're aiming for to make sure the accuracy of your target. In this case, you're trying to aim at understanding people, and particularly the people who are going to be your patients, your customers, if you will. And that's the hard part. To do this, you really need a knowledge of who you're trying to reach. In reality, we cannot aim at everyone. People are too diverse. They want and need different things. We can divide them by factors like gender, age, wealth, culture, and more. But it is certain that the reliance or relevance of certain factors are more or less important than other factors. This relevance factor is what separates a professional demographer, and I know some of the best demographers, especially in healthcare, and it separates them from the amateur demographers. I'll explain in a minute. The true demographer knows what's important to observe and what to measure. In healthcare, age is the most relevant of anything that you're going to look at because age and healthcare are so often tied together. Now, income is important as examples. Changes in demography may be more telling than static statistics. The rate of change that you're hoping to see is, well, it tells what most amateurs can only guess at. You see, it's given that in an area, it's going to change. It's going to grow, it's going to shrink, it's going to get richer, it's going to get poorer. The population is a moving target, and I've said this very often. But the rate of change tells us more than just what most amateurs are going to guess at. Never forget that one must understand the sources of the data to make accurate projections of their meaning. So it's not enough to say, oh, we're growing. How much you're growing? Why are you growing? That's what you as a doctor are looking for when you're trying to analyze a site. Now, does geography matter? Remember that demographics and geographics are related sciences, and they're in fact sciences. There are rules and laws that apply to each of them. But if you don't know what to look for, you're going to make some pretty big mistakes, and that's not going to be what you want to do. Amateur demographers tend to ignore geography. They kind of think, well, if I get the numbers right or more or less right, then it should all be good, right? If that were only so. They forget that geography is the context of demography. The number of people per square mile changes the way that we understand the population in that area. The more crowded that a neighborhood is, it will determine how far that population will travel to get to your office, for example. So if you're in a densely populated area, most people will only travel 5 to 10 minutes. If it's a low population density, as we see in rural locations, that entirely gets turned on its head. Each practice type will be or have an ideal and non-ideal base on the size of the patient base per unit of space. Now, let me explain what I mean. If you get into an area, it may be that there are no competitors in that site. You may think, ooh, whoopee, we got no competitors. We're going to make lots of money. Unfortunately, that's not really true. The number of people per square mile is going to tell you how much that patient base is going to be able to produce. You have to know this so that you can determine how viable or profitable an area is going to be. And that's why I'm bringing it up here. Some of our clients have found when they've used other demographers that they don't know really if they're going to make money or not in the site. And I don't want you to be left out in the dark. Amateurs don't see how a change in the speed of public transit, I mean, how long it takes, in other words, to get from point A to point B, can help or hurt the practice and its potential. So drive time analysis, which is a function of geography, is going to be really important to know what you have to find out about how good an area is going to be. Now, does it matter if the demographer knows healthcare as opposed to generic demographics? Well, obviously, it is going to matter. So there's a classification of demographer where people will know the background on the population, its viability, its impact on profit and loss, and production and collections. So that is why, in fact, you've got to have a demographer who understands your business. Now, we are healthcare demographers at Dr. Demographics, but unfortunately, there are some people who assume that just by knowing any numbers that are put out for free or that you pay for is going to tell you what you need to know. And that rarely is the case. Each type of practice will have its own set of analytic tools to evaluate a site. So if you are looking at a site for an endodontic practice, the number of endodontists and referring doctors will matter a lot to the viability of that site. Only an experienced healthcare demographer can differentiate a diamond in the rough, thus versus a barely viable location. You have to understand something in this case about endodontics and how people refer in for endodontics. It isn't just enough to say, well, there are a lot of people practicing or there are very few people. You have to understand how those practices operate and what they offer. The patient age, educational attainment, marital status, and household income, just as an example, will have an impact on the demand for your services. Obviously, the number of providers will influence demand as well, but the actual metrics on this data or these data will need to be evaluated. And that's why when we're looking at an area to see if it is going to work for you and be a profitable site, we have to understand something about how people buy endodontics or orthodontics or endocrinology or whatever else. Growth is generally desirable. So if an area is growing, that's generally a good thing. but certain healthcare practices have much more demand in patient turnout than other types. Now, for example, oncologists provide services over a much longer period of time with patients than, say, ophthalmologists or oral and maxillofacial surgeons. The treatment period varies with the type of practice, and that will affect the practice viability. So you say, can I put an endodontist practice here, or an orthodontic practice, or an oncology practice? It's going to vary because the profitability of each practice type, looking at the services they offer, is going to make a big, big difference. Now, that's a hard concept for some people to make. They just want to say, oh, there are a lot of people, therefore it's a good place to go. But you have to say, is it a good place to go given the types of services that we want to offer? That is what matters. Now, only a demographer who understands these practices and patient profiles can advise doctors on the site selection and other issues on practice-based character or patient-based character. You will understand how freeways operate. There's an off-ramp and an on-ramp, and the referring doctors may follow along that path or not. You have to know that, though. And your demographer can help you to know, given the type of practice, is this a sufficiently large patient base or customer base or referral base for me to make money? Now let's read the tea leaves just briefly. The investment in creating a practice or purchasing a practice is filled with more risk than ever before. I mean, right now, you want to own a practice. You definitely do. It's an asset. It's going to continue over time. And even though right now there may not be significant growth, you know that if the area has the demographic character, the patient base, and the referral base to make your practice go, well, then it's a good investment. But sometimes this information can be a little deceptive, a little tricky. And that's what I'm offering as far as some caution. Now, you don't have the luxury of years to make a practice profitable. In the old days, you could go 5-10 years and be just fine. But the practice loans must be paid back quicker than ever. In other words, you may choose a location and may have a good referral base and a good patient base, but you've got to make sure that it is delivering profit quicker now than ever before. The meter is running. Failure to succeed is hardly an option. The only way to succeed is to choose experts, including demographers, who can shortcut the development cycle, promote success, and eliminate risks. Now, here's the bottom line. I believe that owning a practice, and that includes the facility, is going to be important to you and highly desirable. If it takes a long time to make a practice viable, as it has over time, it is going to be very difficult for you to show a profit and to pay back your loans. That is why when we're looking at demographics for healthcare practices, it's a different game than those who used to set up and just kind of hope things got better. Great research is the first step. You don't want to risk your success on an amateur who's just learning the ropes on your dime. Now, what I'm getting at is, do I know if an area is going to be good for an orthodontist, for a general dentist, for an oncologist, or any other practice type? The answer is I can tell based upon what the referral base, patient base, and general demographic character is proving to be, because these are generally manifestations of age and other factors that your practice needs to know about. And that's why I'm making the point about making sure your demographer is a real professional and experienced at looking at the numbers for your type of practice. If you would like to get in touch with us, Dr. Demographics can be found at 849-0499. And you're probably going to talk to Mike. Now, Mike Green is very experienced in different practice types. When he needs help from others, he'll ask for it. But the idea is we've got to give doctors the metrics to show if a site is going to be viable and thrive quickly in the near future. This is Scott McDonald, and thanks so much for watching.